Dear friends, welcome. We are going to continue our conference, and I am privileged to have a very special guest today, Julia Weinstein, Vice President of Programs and Education of the Women of Reform Judaism North American Board. Julia, welcome to our conference, Friends Stay United. Please share with us a little bit about yourself, and we are really privileged to have you today in our conference.
Thank you so much, Rita. It is my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Good morning to everyone from the West Coast of the United States, where I live in Los Angeles, California. As Rita mentioned, my name is Julia Weinstein, and I am Vice President of Programs and Education at Women of Reform Judaism, known as WRJ. WRJ is the women's arm of the Union for Reform Judaism. We represent tens of thousands of women in Reform congregations all across North America, as well as individual women and women's groups. Our mission is to strengthen the voice of women worldwide, to empower them to create caring communities, to nurture congregations, to cultivate personal and spiritual growth, and advocate for and promote progressive Jewish values. Our offices are located in New York City. WRJ is a nonprofit organization with a paid professional staff led by our executive director, Rabbi Marla Feldman. Our board of directors consists of volunteer lay leaders led by our current president, Susan Bass. WRJ was founded in 1913. For over 100 years, WRJ has had a profound impact on women and on the reform movement. What has been the secret to WRJ's success over so many years? To answer that, we first need to ask what makes WRJ unique among nonprofit organizations. At its core, WRJ exists to ensure that every Reformed Jewish woman is equipped to fulfill her potential and improve the world. There are three areas that distinguish WRJ from other American Jewish women's organizations. First is Sisterhood. Sisterhood is reflected in the strength of our women's networks, our practice of hospitality and community, and the friendship and support we offer to one another. In fact, I feel that Sisterhood is a gift to all of the women in our organization because I have friends now all over North America and all across the world due to WRJ. Second is spirituality. Unlike other American Jewish women's organizations, prayer and worship are part of what we do and who we are. And social good. WRJ's philanthropy and advocacy, social justice work support reform and progressive Jewish communities worldwide. And we're going to talk about this a lot more later on in my remarks. WRJ is unique in that we combine all three of these values in everything that we do. Over the course of the last century, WRJ has been on a journey of unimaginable change. So I want to talk a little bit about how WRJ began. The journey started from humble beginnings when horse and buggies were still the norm. And that journey brought us to today. And look how far we've come. Today, each of us hold in one hand more computing power than NASA had when it put a man on the moon. And we also hold in this single small device the collective knowledge of mankind and womankind, I might add. So let's compare that achievement, the achievement of where we are today, to what it was like in 1913 in the United States when WRJ was founded. In 1913, Las Vegas had a population of 30 people, 30. Here is a photo of Fremont Street in Las Vegas in 1913 and the same street in 2019. What a change. In 1913, the first automobile road to cross the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast had just been completed. There were only 8,000 motor cars in the United States, no gas stations, people refueled at drugstores or pharmacies. Women washed their hair once a month with borax or egg yolks. Today we buy our shampoo already prefabricated in a bottle. And only 14% of homes in the United States had bathtubs. That was the cultural climate in the US when the WRJ story began, and it is quite a story. On December 13th, 1912, an invitation was sent out by the president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. It went to all ladies' organizations connected with congregations belonging to the Union, and it asked them to attend a meeting to be held in Cincinnati. The meeting was called specifically for the purpose of organizing a federation of temple sisterhoods. So women wearing hats and gloves began their journey across the country by horse and buggy and by train to Cincinnati, where they founded an affiliate of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, which is now Union of Reform Judaism. And that organization had been founded 40 years earlier in 1873. So on January 21st, 1913, 156 delegates representing 52 congregational women's groups met in Cincinnati. And they organized the National Federation of Temple Sisterhoods, which is called NFTS, and which was renamed in 1993 to Women of Reform Judaism. And at its founding, shortly after it was founded, NFTS had over 9,000 members, and it quickly became the largest Jewish women's religious organization in the United States. So here's a photo of the executive committee at their pre-convention meeting. We don't look like that anymore, but I have to say those hats are quite beautiful. Here is an image of the meeting program from that very first meeting. And if you could read this small print here, you would see that one of their committees was called Hebrew Union College Scholarships. And they already had set their priorities by that first meeting. And WRJ still provides scholarships to Hebrew Union College students today. Here is an image of the minutes they took from that meeting. And now, of course, all of our minutes are digital, either a PDF and an email, or sometimes even a video recording of the meeting. And look how beautiful that handwriting is. I don't know about you, but my handwriting is terrible since I now type everything. All of the documents that I just showed you are in the American Jewish Archives on the HUC campus in Cincinnati. And the collection that houses the WRJ NFTS documents in the archives has about 43.2 linear feet of boxes and cartons covering the period beginning in 1913 to the present. Carrie O. Simon was chosen to serve as the first president. Carrie recognized the increased power which had come to the American Jewess, and she advocated that this power be exercised also in congregational life. Under her presidency, the NFTS wanted to strengthen the temple sisterhoods that had already been in existence and to transfer the women's roles from the home to a larger, more public sphere. NFTS advanced the role of women in Jewish life, and women stepped up and took their place in reform movement leadership. Advocacy was a huge part of what NFTS's philosophy was right from its inception, and its women were at the forefront of social action and change. They embraced relief efforts during World War I and brought German rabbinical students to study in the United States after Hitler shut down Jewish academies of learning. Here is a photo of NFTS women in 1936 conducting a voter registration campaign. So many WRJ women in the last year have conducted the same kind of voter get out the vote campaigns in this most recent United States election. The women of NFTS supported their synagogues and communities. And when I look at these photos, I think that other than the outfits, these scenes are familiar. Women gathering in congregations and together to do work and to learn. And they raised funds, just as we do today, for the causes they cared about. What is the Uniongram story? What is this that we see on our screen? Before NFTS was founded, Blanche Stoltz, who was one of those delegates to the NFTS founding convention, attended the wedding of a young German couple whom her rabbi was marrying. She saw that many of the letters of Mazel Tov that the couple received were sent in the same kind of envelope, identical envelopes. When she asked about the envelopes, the bride said she had belonged to a Jewish girls' club in Germany because she had immigrated to the United States, and that club raised money for charity by sending messages on beautiful cards for its members. So after NFTS was created, Blanche remembered those cards and those envelopes, and the rest is history. They called those cards Uniongrams, and we still call the cards Uniongrams today. The design has changed, but we still raise funds by selling Uniongrams. Uniongrams at that time were sold to raise money for the NFTS HUC Scholarship Fund, and Uniongrams became a major source of fundraising. The scholarship fund that supported the students the scholarship fund supported the students training to become rabbis at Hebrew Union College. So let me explain a little bit about some of the organizations that WRJ helped found over the years. In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, NFTS was one of the primary supporters of HUC. Each NFTS scholarship that they gave to the students was $300 US, and that amount paid for all the students' expenses, including tuition, books, room, and board. And what other expense did the matriarchs, the mothers, want to make sure to cover for the boys studying for the rabbinate? Laundry. Just 9 years after NFTS was founded, in 1922, which is just after World War I, American local sisterhoods raised over $300,000 US to build a dormitory on the HUC campus in Cincinnati. The boys who were studying to become rabbis had to live in boarding houses or rent rooms in the town, and the sisterhood women wanted them to have a dorm. Today, that amount, $300,000, would be over $4 million US today. And the building that they built continues to be the hub of the campus today, and they still call it the Sisterhood Dorm. So you can see here the logo for NIFTY. After World War II, NFTS founded the National Federation of Temple Youth, or NIFTY, for high school age students. Our foremothers recognized, they knew in their hearts that the future of the movement depended on keeping the youth engaged. And you know what? They were right. The 2018 WRJ Youth Alumni Impact Study found that the WRJ's youth programs create quality, lifelong Jewish outcomes. And of course, NIFTY is still extremely viable and successful. And our Temple youth who go to NIFTY camps, participate in NIFTY programs, remain in higher numbers involved in Jewish life. In 1931, WRJ also founded the Jewish Braille Institute of America, which helps the blind and visually impaired. Over the course of the 20th century, NFTS helped bring about enormous change for Jewish women in congregational life. Women began to be elected to synagogue boards. Women began to read scripture from the Bima, and female religious leadership, women rabbis, and cantors became the norm. And then finally, in 1972, in the United States, we had the ordination of the first woman rabbi, Sally Prezant. And the milestones continued. WRJ Women marched, and WRJ Women continued to innovate and make an impact on Reform Judaism. In 2007, WRJ published a historic and award-winning The Torah, a Women's Commentary. There had never before been a women's Torah commentary, and this book now is used across the globe in Torah study by many Reform Jews. So WRJ's narrative would not be complete without telling the story of Dr. Jane Evans. Jane led WRJ for 43 years, and she was often called the First Lady of Reform Judaism. She was hired in 1933 as NFTS's first full-time executive director. Jane began to push NFTS beyond its original mission of service, which had been centered in the congregation and religious school and community, to beyond the walls of the congregation. NFTS always had a commitment to women's rights and social justice. The very first resolution passed by NFTS was in 1915, just 2 years after its founding. That resolution opposed the pending immigration bill that would have imposed a literacy requirement on all immigrants entering the United States. And it's interesting that those kinds of bills are still being proposed today. And had there been a literacy requirement in 1915, many of us would not be here today, as many of us have forefathers and mothers who could not have passed the literacy test. So from its beginnings, WRJ was always part of something much larger than itself and its members. And in fact, Jane took us global. So what is the connection between WRJ or NFTS and the United Nations? WRJ has been involved with the United States since its inception, since it was founded in 1945. WRJ's or NFTS's executive director, remember, Jane Evans, was both the keynote speaker and a State Department consultant to the United States delegation that took part in drafting the United Nations Charter in 1945. Because Jane was deeply committed to human rights, women's rights, civil rights, and she was also committed to interfaith relations. And those commitments are reflected in our resolutions and advocacy efforts to this day. And if you go to the WRJ website, you can see all of the resolutions that WRJ has passed since its first one in 1915. And new ones are being passed every few years as our legislative body meets. Because of Jane Evans, WRJ was right there at the beginning of the world's biggest and longest lasting international collaboration, the UN. And at the UN today, we have a team of WRJ representatives, and they go to meetings at the UN every week. And WRJ continues to have a seat and a voice at the global table because we are an NGO, a non-governmental organization, with the right to help shape policy at the UN, along with many other NGOs like the World Wildlife Fund and Doctors Without Borders, etc. So WRJ women are activists. Jewish women in particular have always been represented in movements for change. And that is true still today. WRJ women and women all across the globe are participating in advocating for change. WRJ women live their lives and their advocacy stories are continuing to be written. These photos reflect some of the advocacy efforts of our members across North America in advocating for gun violence prevention. And you can see here also an image from the very first WRJ Social Justice Conference in Washington, D.C. WRJ continues to take positions on current court cases and on other issues of our times. For example, I mentioned getting out the vote in this recent US election. And you can see we partner with other organizations to advocate on behalf of women and families and civil rights in North America. And one day our daughters and WRJ's successors will be as proud of the work we are doing right now as we are of the work our founding foremothers started in 1913. WRJ Philanthropy is at the core of what we do. WRJ has raised millions of dollars to support and strengthen the reform movement. And now I'd like to show a video that explains what the WRJ Yes Fund is and to explain the impact of WRJ's philanthropy.
Since its founding in 1913, WRJ has supported the Reform Jewish movement and thousands of Jewish individuals across the globe. Through WRJ's Yes Fund and other philanthropic efforts, you have enabled grants to many worthy recipients with a special focus on strengthening reform and progressive Jewish values, education, community, social justice, reproductive health and rights, and youth. Your donations have funded legislative assistants at the Religious Action Center, who lead advocacy efforts on your behalf on issues such as women's health, immigration, reproductive justice, and pay equity. WRJ initiated and built some of the reform movement's foundational programs. Generations of WRJ supporters created NIFTY, one of the earliest WRJ grant recipients.
Thank you, WRJ, for your incredible support of NIFTY and all things youth. We so appreciate all that you do.
The WRJ has impacted my life and thousands of other Reform Jewish teens who've gone through NIFTY, who've experienced any of the programming that the WRJ has supported. I'm in particular grateful for the way that the WRJ has supported all of my endeavors, from wanting to serve on the executive planning committee for the inaugural WRJ's Social Justice Conference, all the way through funding Not My Generation's first summit for young adults against gun violence. So the WRJ shows up for young people. I will forever be grateful for that.
WRJ Women gave birth to the URJ Camp movement. We continue to give scholarships, sending girls to the URJ's 6 Points SciTech Academy.
SciTech has always been a place that has valued inclusion. Since the very beginning, in partnership with the Women for Reform Judaism, SciTech has been working on making sure that our young girls and our young women know that this is a place that they belong.
It's important to support women in STEM because women are so underrepresented in STEM fields that it can be very intimidating to walk into a science or technology classroom.
Whether in North America, Israel, Europe, or Latin America, WRJ grants spread stability and hope throughout the world.
During the COVID-19 lockdown, we did many projects all around Haifa to help the communities here. And we also heard that you, Women of Reform Judaism, helped us, our community, those students who didn't have the resources to study online. You helped us, and we thank you very much for it.
WRJ grants build the next generation of Jewish leaders through scholarships to progressive and reform Jewish seminaries.
The commitment of the Women of Reform Judaism and their participation in the Yes Fund have ensured that youth from throughout the world have the opportunity to go to progressive Jewish camps in South Africa, in Argentina, in the former Soviet Union, Wherever Reform Jews live, the Women of Reform Judaism make sure that young people can get the benefit of Jewish education and Jewish camping. WRJ and the Yes Fund have also supported the education of future progressive Jewish leaders around the world, training rabbis at the Leo Baeck College in London, at the new Machon Institute for Advanced Jewish Studies in Moscow, and at Geiger College in Potsdam. Without the support of WRJ and its Yes Fund, dozens of Reform congregations would not have their rabbis today.
Is our mission as Jews, to pass tradition from generation to generation. I had to do it for my parents and grandparents, who were not able to do it themselves living in the Soviet Union. I wanted to bridge this gap and pass on the tradition to my daughter and others in my and her generation. This is my personal vision for today and for tomorrow. Can you hear us?
And I cannot find words or enough time to thank Women of Reform Judaism, who supported me as the first Israeli woman to be ordained in our Israeli rabbinic program, and has continued all these years to support all our Israeli rabbinic students, which has now become over 117 ordinees who have changed the face and soul of Israel. I also want to thank you for putting out this incredible women's commentary, and in a couple of months we will actually be publishing an Israeli translation. So thank you for your love, for your support for HUC, for promoting women and the Jewish people.
As a woman, a leader, and a rabbinical student, the connection and support of Women of Reform Judaism are essential to my work and personal development. It is through the Women of Reform Judaism's support that women like me are now able to occupy important places and lead others to a most important change in Latin America's Reform communities. Thank you for your support.
Your support of the Yes Fund and other WRJ endeavors make these programs a reality and makes WRJ part of the fabric of the Jewish philanthropic world.
Thank you,
As you heard in the video, WRJ supports the Netzer FSU camps, which allow campers to learn about Judaism, make Jewish friends, and find their Jewish identities. So I want to tell you about one grant that was given in 2014 during the Crimean conflict. WRJ awarded an emergency grant to help move the SFU camp in the Carpathian Mountains, located in Ukraine, to Belarus, so that the children could enjoy camp safely and away from the threats of the conflict. And you heard in the video how during this COVID situation here, WRJ was able to provide computers, help provide computers and other resources to young people and students at the Leo Baeck Center in Israel. So what else does WRJ do for women? Rita spoke earlier in another session about her experience at WRJ's Wilkenfeld International Women's Leadership Seminar. This leadership training program is for women in Reform progressive congregations around the world who have been identified as potential emerging leaders. Participants cultivate leadership skills. They learn about the Reform progressive movement across the globe at a much deeper level, and they establish relationships and friendships with one another, with WRJ, and with the World Union for Progressive Judaism. And WRJ is hoping to be able to host the next Wilkenfeld conference in conjunction with the World Union Connections Conference, which is being planned for the spring of 2023. So we hope you apply for one of our grants and that you will consider attending in 2023. In North America, WRJ holds an annual Freed Women's Conference. This conference was made possible by a grant by Joanne Freed, and we're very grateful to her for her generosity and her support, as always, for WRJ. This conference is a weekend-long experience to hone leadership skills and deepen connections with women, with their sisterhoods, and with leaders and WRJ. This conference is for leaders, both rising and experienced, as well as for women who are interested in just learning more about WRJ. And during this weekend, they not only create connections and network with other Reform women, but they experience meaningful worship. They learn from speakers and they have fun. You can see some of these photos. We're worshiping, we're dancing, we're singing, we're listening to lectures and music, and you can see those blue ballots held up where we're voting on important resolutions. WRJ held its very first Women's Empowerment Awards dinner just less than a year ago, last December, at the URJ Biennial in Chicago. It seems like much longer ago, but it was only in 2019 in December. And the 2019 award was presented to Jewish Women's Archive for its pioneering work documenting women's stories. So I talked before about Jewish Women's Archive. It is on HUC's campus in Cincinnati, and it houses many documents about women's stories in Reform Judaism, and it includes all of those NFTS WRJ files that we spoke about. It's a tremendous resource, and I urge you to visit the Jewish Women's Archive's website because a lot of their material is posted online as well. And I received, as I told you, many of these photos from earlier, the archival photos from the Jewish Women's Archives files. Every so often, every 2 years usually, WRJ does a women's mission to Israel. This women's trip is open to any woman who identifies with our values and would like to visit Israel with WRJ. And our very last trip just took place in February, right before the pandemic shut down US international travel. I was on that trip, and in fact, we came back on the last day of February, and by the beginning of March, we were all told to stay at home. So these trips are opportunities for North American women to learn about Israel, to meet our Yes Fund grantees. And here you can see a photo of a certificate that was presented at Leo Beck Center, and to build connections with Israeli women and communities. They're so much fun. I've been on a few of them, and hopefully we'll be able to return to Israel again soon. So no mention of WRJ is complete without trying to look ahead at what our story will be going forward, and to also take into account our current challenges, namely COVID-19. The pandemic we are battling now is a once-in-a-generation experience that will probably define us as an organization and as individuals for decades, if not for our lifetimes. So how is COVID shaping WRJ's present and immediate future? When the pandemic hit in early March, we all at home were struggling with a new reality, working from home, using Zoom, physical distancing, wearing masks, finding new ways to connect virtually. And WRJ immediately recognized that we needed to step up and provide opportunities for women to connect with WRJ during this time. We had a conference scheduled in May in Tucson, Arizona, and we had to pivot from that in-person women's conference to a women's virtual conference. You can see we called it Virtual Freed Women's Conference. It was in May 2020. And we pivoted just as your organizers had to pivot to this online conference. WRJ had to find new ways to connect. We reimagined existing programming and created new programs such as virtual discussions. We created a couple of virtual trips to Israel using our Israeli tour guide and Zoom. And we started more online book and movie discussions to find ways to connect. And out of these changes, we saw women's groups, sisterhoods, and women's groups also begin to pivot and program virtually. And we realized then that we're actually reaching many more women than before, and new women as well who weren't able to travel and attend our in-person conferences. So this really is the beginning of a new chapter in our WRJ story. Experts are saying that virtual meetings and gatherings are here to stay. And so once we're able to get together physically again, we'll most likely offer hybrid programming with a virtual component together with our in-person events so we can bring in more and more women to learn about WRJ. So WRJ, in its essence, is a place for all women who identify with our mission and share our Reform Progressive Jewish values. WRJ empowers women, connects women with other like-minded women across North America and the world, and women who attend WRJ events, workshops, and trainings leave with renewed purpose, feeling rejuvenated and fulfilled, feeling more deeply engaged in and connected to WRJ, to their Judaism, and to the Reform movement. With the support of our sisters and friends, we're better able to serve as leaders in our professional lives, in our communities, and even in our personal lives. WRJ proves that women can be active, productive, and successful volunteer lay leaders in the Reform movement. And I hope this presentation leaves you seeing that the role women play and understanding how we have shaped and supported the Reform movement in North America and worldwide, and how that can continue going forward. So thank you so much for having me today.
Dear Julia, thank you so much. Such amazing presentation and so many familiar faces that we can see there, not only from former Soviet Union, but also from all over the world. It's a huge privilege for us to be a part of your work activities, those funds that you are supporting our camps and our future rabbis. And if you can see, I just put in our chat a couple comments also from our rabbis and from our guests from abroad that are grateful to all your work that you are doing, because actually this is something really, really amazing. I want to ask you one question about your lay position. Why it's so important for you to be on this role, and what does it mean for you?
Thank you for asking that question, because many of us start at the very local level. I started my WRJ leadership journey as the mom in the Hebrew school who made the latkes for the third graders at Hanukkah. And I did other volunteer work in my synagogue and slowly moved up and became interested in getting more involved. So I was asked to join the Sisterhood board. Most of our leadership journeys begin by someone asking us to step up. We don't often say, oh, I want to be the president, I want to join the group. We're asked. So when I was asked, it was just at that right moment when I wanted to get more involved. And I became a member of the Sisterhood board. I then worked my way up, treasurer. Then I became president of my Sisterhood. And I went to my first WRJ event. And at the first WRJ event, I was blown away by the amazing women I could hear and learn from. And it induced me to go to more and more events. And again, I was asked and I moved up. I as a vice president of WRJ, I have been privileged to work with so many lay leaders, women from all across North America who are donating their time to make this organization work. We have philanthropy volunteers, we have programming volunteers, we have women who support sisterhoods and congregations, we have educational programs. All of that is done by lay leaders. My most gratifying moments are when I can interact with groups like yours, when I go to Israel and I meet the grantees, when I see the children, when I hear the students at the Sci-Tech camps. Those are the science tech camps that URJ just started a few years ago, where we gave grants specifically to encourage girls. And when we see that participation of girls multiply from just a few in the beginning to many more now. And then my most gratifying part of my leadership journey is all the friends I have. And you and I, Rita, were talking about Zooming, you know, and how Zoom Judaism has evolved. Well, Zoom leadership allows leaders from all across North America to all work for a common goal. And when we meet regularly, we become friends. We talked about how this two-dimensional, medium still fosters a close personal friendship. And I have friends, honestly, in almost every state in the United States and in Canada. And I feel, and in Israel as well. And I feel that I am so connected with wonderful women who I enjoy being with and working with. That's the benefit to me. And I've grown personally as well, more self-confident, more knowledgeable, Zoom technology skills. There are many things that we all learn.
Thank you very much. This is really amazing. And maybe the last question that I have, what you would like to wish all those people who are actually in our communities in FSU now, and not just in FSU, all over the world, looking on this session, and will look after the end, the conference will end it. What is their wish that, looking on this 2020 that was not very easy for all of us from all different points of view, but looking forward to 2021, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that conferences like the one you've been putting on over these last 3 days offer so much information to people who are attending. And in fact, you're posting them online where people can look at every single session. Take the information you're learning from these sessions, bring it back to your home communities, figure out how you can work to engage people in your community using the skills that you hear on these sessions. And then, yes, we're stuck at home right now, hopefully soon to be free again to meet in person, but use the technology, use Zoom in your own communities, even with small groups, to continue to share the learning that you've acquired this weekend, and spread it out, spread it forward, train people, ask someone to join you. Look for people who share your values and your interests and invite them into your community. I said that most people start because they were asked. It's hard for people to break into a new community. Look for people who are interested, who already have some kind of connection, and invite them in, and you'll be surprised. You will broaden your group, and everyone will benefit from that.
Thank you very much. And personal note, I'm so thankful to Rabbi Marla that connected between us. I feel honored to know you now, and I really believe that we will continue to be connected and will become friends. So you have one more friend now in Israel.
Yay.
And I am sure that you have much more in our Russian-speaking countries in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Thank you once again for being with us, for joining our conference, and thank you for Women of Reform Judaism for everything that you are doing, and you are doing so amazing projects, programs, actives. This is unbelievable, and I really believe that the organization and the values that you have are amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much.